Hey, how's that for being perfectly on time? 7:30 Eastern Time, 4:30 Pacific, right on the dot. I like that new music on the intro there. A little bit of a Rush feel to it on that breakdown. What's up, everybody? I'm Dan Viens. This is Seahawks Forever. Guys, we have 18 days left until the start of training camp. We are in the home stretch. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And we've done all the lists, right? Someone called this list season about a month ago. I can't unsee that. I've done my Mount Rushmore this year. We get to talk about the Seahawks all-time top 50 players. Last season, we did the all-underrated team and our own all-time team. But I came up with something a couple of days ago that was a lot of fun to sketch out. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the Seahawks all-time draft history. And in particular, the last 5 years. We're going to break this into 3 phases for you. And then I'm going to look back over the last 5 drafts for John Schneider and ultimately assign a grade to it. Because there was a clear shift along the way. And I think there's some tangible things that we can take away from this. We're talking the last 5 drafts. Call it a comeback, per the title of this video. John Schneider was down. He's bounced back. How good have the last 5 years been, and where has it taken us? Up next on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
There are times where things go really smoothly on the show, and there are other times where they don't. And some of that is operator error, brain farts, brain cramps. I just had a major one. I think I covered up for it well. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but maybe if you have access to me through DM or if you're a member and you can message me, reach out to me and I'll let you in on the secret. It's kind of funny. It had me cracking up during the intro. I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. Follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the thumbs up if you like what I do. If you listen on audio, be sure to subscribe or follow so that you always get notification of new episodes. All the other ways that you can support me are down below. You can buy me a beer. You can sign up for the Patreon. The new Substack, which I've posted 2 pieces on in my first week there, knocked the dust off of the writing side of what I do. It's been a lot of fun. I can't wait to get going on that. And I think it's going to really sort of marry well with what I do here on this channel, especially as we get into training camp and we get to cover the football team. And just a reminder that I have been given access to the first few days of training camp. So I will be there on the practice field, get to talk to players and be there for the media availabilities and get to see things up close, and then get an opportunity to sit down with the media relations department and talk about full-time credentials. So fingers crossed, if I do get them, thank you to you guys because you put me in this position by supporting this channel. All the more tangible ways that you can support me are also listed down below because I am a full-time content creator. So let's do this. Let's get into this. This is the, just kind of, if I could just give it a name, tie it up in a bow. Just taking a look at John Schneider's draft history. I think this bottomed out a couple of years ago. There was a moment where Mina Kimes, who's a huge Seahawk fan, she tries to be objective as she covers the whole league, but there was a time that she went on ESPN, one of their studio shows. This might have been last offseason. And she was just talking about how the roster looked and what her expectations were for the team. And she said, look, John Schneider got a great reputation for what happened at the beginning of his career with drafting. But, man, he went through a slump, and I don't know if they've pulled out of it, and he deserves legitimate criticism for that. Well, if he deserves criticism for that, I think he deserves praise for what's been happening lately. Here's what I did. So I broke this into 3 phases. First of all, just take a quick look back over the drafting history. And then I'm going to go draft by draft through the last 5, give some thoughts on it. And then at the end, assign an overall grade to this last phase, which is 2020 until this year, not counting the 2025 draft because we haven't seen them on the field yet. So, yeah, there's some speculation here, obviously. There's a predictive element to this. But I think when it's all said and done, I think you'll see the process that I went through to get here. And then we can discuss whether or not you agree with the grade. One thing about his history is it's very, very clear to me that there have been some legitimate phases. And I broke it into three. I call the first one the Super Bowl phase, the Super Bowl years, 2010, 2012. As good a 3-year drafting run as I would say any GM, any new GM has ever had. But I'd put it up against any 3-year run that any GM has ever had, right? Just a quick recap. 2010, of course, they had the 2 first-round draft picks. Russell Okung at 6, get that franchise left tackle. Earl Thomas at 14. And if you remember, back then, Earl Thomas wasn't kind of a widely renowned consensus stud that Seahawks fans were immediately excited about because they all wanted to draft Taylor Mays, the local kid from O'Day who went to USC, played for Pete Carroll, big freak of an athlete. There were a lot of Seahawks fans pissed off that they took Thomas over Mays. How did that turn out? Golden Tate and Walter Thurman were significant contributors early in their career. And then, of course, Cam Chancellor in the 5th round is one of the great all-time draft steals in NFL history. 2011, for the second straight year, they swung big on the offensive line, not as successfully as they did before. The year before, James Carpenter in the 1st round, John Moffitt in the 2nd. They essentially whiffed on both. I mean, Carpenter ended up playing 10, 11 years in the league as a guard, but he never really fulfilled his draft promise. But thankfully, they bounced back with what will always go down, I believe, as one of the greatest day 3 draft hauls in league history. They got KJ Wright, Richard Sherman, Byron Maxwell, and Malcolm Smith on day 3 that year. 2012, of course, the coup de grace, Schneider putting the finishing touches on a Super Bowl winning foundation. Bruce Irvin was widely panned in the 1st round. He was overdrafted. He was a reach, right? They traded up to get him. That turned out to be okay. Bobby Wagner, Russell Wilson, the team's first 3 selections. Some people forget Bobby Wagner wasn't their first choice. It was pretty clear that Michael Kendricks out of Cal was the guy that they wanted, but he got taken the pick before them. And there's a classic kind of piece of video of John Schneider looking at the TV, watching the broadcast, either ESPN or NFL Network, on the War Room cam. And when Kendricks was selected by the Eagles, 1 pick ahead of him, he wasn't happy. So Bobby Wagner was their first choice. Turned out okay. And then obviously Russell Wilson, and that draft famously got the F from Bleacher Report. But there was a lot of value added later in that draft as well. Guys like Robert Turbin, Jeremy Lane, J.R. Sweezy also added in that draft. Now, things kind of went off the rails after that, right? Phase 2, I call it identity lost. 2013 to 2019, right? There was back-to-back years of trading away the 1st round pick, trying to get impact, trying to get veteran offensive impact. Percy Harvin, Jimmy Graham, neither one really fulfilled their promise. They certainly weren't transformative talents. To make matters worse, sending out center Max Unger in the Graham trade was the start of a free fall that led us all the way up into present day, where we're talking about the offensive line. Is it the curse of Max Unger, or is it the curse of Steve Hutchinson? There are differing opinions on that. But generally, it was just a bad draft after bad draft. Some really bad ones. 2017, 2019, especially representative of this period. Malik McDowell in 2017, after trading down multiple times and then taking him, they thought he was going to be that long, versatile, inside-outside, super athletic defensive lineman that they were slobbering all over. He obviously had some character red flags coming out, got injured before he ever played a game, and never had a career, really. And then 2019 was a year where they just overthought things. They got too cute. They needed defensive line. They needed pass rush. It was a loaded class, and they just kept trading down and trading down and trading down. And guys that they thought were going to be available after the trade downs just kept getting snapped up in front of them. They had to settle for LJ Collier. And again, that defensive line group with those 2 drafts really was set back by years, and it took them years after that, really until last year, maybe the year before, to really kind of catch up for that. I would submit and argue that until they acquired Leonard Williams at the deadline last year, that was kind of the, after drafting Byron Murphy, kind of putting the bow on rebuilding that defensive line that they tried so hard to build for a while. So that was, and Schneider's pretty outspoken about that period. And he acknowledges that one of the things they did is they drafted more for floor than they did for ceiling, because they just felt like with all the alphas that they had in the locker room, that these guys weren't going to be able to stand up to them and weren't going to be able to beat them out. So they were just kind of looking for safe players. And then phase 3, which I call the comeback, hence the name of this video, right? Something clicked after that 2019 draft. Kind of an enough was enough. And when you combine it with the 2017 experience with Malik McDowell, they really started focusing on a couple of tangible factors that still remain to this day. They really dialed in their process. One thing is they really raised the bar as far as character goes and added that element into their draft grade in a more significant way, so just to avoid or potentially avoid. You can never, it's not an exact science, but the Malik McDowell situation. And then kind of their response to the LJ Collier year is early in the draft anyway, stop drafting for need, take best player available. And then the third thing was draft more for ceiling and upside than floor. Draft players that have star traits, star qualities, that if we get the most out of that player, we've got a blue chipper. And that wasn't necessarily the case during phase 2. There were also some other things. If you look back at this period, there are fewer chances taken on small school prospects. They tend to like players who have played lots of football, 2 or 3 years as a full-time starter, 30, 40 starts, and from big conferences, big schools that play top-notch competition every week and often play in postseason games as well. And so that leads us into this period, this phase, which started in 2020. So that's this draft, right? Let's go down memory lane a little bit. Jordan Brooks, linebacker, Texas Tech, the first-round pick. Darrell Taylor in the second round. Damian Lewis, guard at LSU in the third. Colby Parkinson, tight end, Stanford in the fourth. DJ Dallas, running back, Miami in the fourth. Alton Robinson, edge, Syracuse in the fifth. Sixth round, Freddie Swain, wide receiver, Florida. Seventh round, Stephen Sullivan, tight end, LSU. What strikes me about this draft, and I actually can't remember now why they have the extra fourth, if that was acquired in trade or if it was a comp pick, but look at the way this draft is laid out, right? After years and years of trading away first-round picks, and then trading down, there were a lot of drafts during that time with, 10, 11 picks, but they were all kind of littered throughout different rounds, whereas this one is much more static, right? Much more native to where they were picking. Interestingly enough, in this draft, when the name Jordan Brooks was called, I was like, huh? Like who? I mean, I hadn't begun diving deep enough into the draft, or as deep back then as I do now. And so Jordan Brooks was a name I was familiar with, but I didn't really study him that closely. And so I just wasn't sure, inside linebacker in the first round, really. They still had Bobby Wagner. We thought he was playing at a high level, and I just didn't know enough about Brooks. And so it was another one of those kind of classic Seahawks draft picks where we're like, well, I didn't see that coming. Darrell Taylor was one I loved in the moment. Obvious concerns about the leg injury, and that ended up keeping him out his whole rookie year. But I just thought in that year's draft class, he had, as much as anyone in that class, the bend, the ability to bend and get around the edge. We saw that in flashes in his career. He never really lived up to what we wanted him to be, but he was a very productive player for a good amount of time. Damian Lewis started from day one, established himself as a good enough guard that he went and got paid big time by Carolina when he walked away as a free agent. We all agree, I think, that they should have kept him. They should have figured out a way to manipulate the salary cap and keep him. He was, I don't know that he's ever going to be a first team all-pro type player, but just a very, very good player at a position when the Seahawks needed more good players over this time period. Parkinson had his moments, was productive. They wanted to retain him 2 years ago, tried to re-sign him. He ends up going to the Rams. I think he saw a better opportunity there. They end up pivoting and bringing Noah Fant back instead. Dallas, there were a lot of, during his career here, there were a lot of times where the Seahawks running back room was beat up and they had to turn to him, and he was always a productive player, always ran really hard. Swain had some moments. Sullivan never really hit. He was kind of a project. They tried him at defensive end for a little while before letting him go. He's caught on. He's stuck at tight end. He's been in Carolina the last couple of years. What's interesting about this draft is Alton Robinson. This was a year I talked about how we had to rebuild that defensive line room after 17 and 19. Well, they double dip here, obviously, with Taylor and Robinson. I loved that at the time. And Robinson really showed some flashes as a rookie, but his body failed him, and he just got beat up and had to retire prematurely. Alton Robinson, and this speaks to this 5-year draft class phase. Alton Robinson, the only player not in the league anymore out of the last 5 drafts. Says something about that. The 2021 draft. Now, obviously, this one coming off COVID was unusual. I get the process. I understand the process. They had less evaluation time, less tape on these players because of the abbreviated season in 2020, in some cases completely canceled. And so they thought it was better value to use draft picks to acquire proven veterans, right? They trade a first and a third for Jamal Adams, the following year as well. They trade a 5th-round pick to Gabe Jackson, trying to fortify that offensive line with the veteran. I understand the process, but they just whiffed on this draft class. The best player out of this class was Trey Brown. And they let him walk without even trying to re-sign him last offseason. He's now in San Francisco. And he had moments. They probably don't win that game at Detroit 2 years ago without his contributions, but he just never really could stay healthy. Forsyth was a guy where the scouting reports were wrong because multiple services and analysts, when he was drafted, I read the same thing in multiple places. Good enough to start right now as a pass protector. That was the book on him. Needed work as a run blocker. Turned out he was bad at both. Never really made it as a swing tackle. But this draft will forever be known. And then, obviously Jamal Adams has the historic good first season, signs a massive contract extension, gets injured, ends up being released prematurely. Gabe Jackson was never as good as they needed him to be. But the Dwayne Eskridge pick obviously is going to go down in Seahawks infamy because it came 8 picks before the selection of Creed Humphrey, right? Center, a perennial need in Seattle for 10 years, basically, ever since they traded Max Unger. This draft will always be known as the Creed Humphrey draft, the draft that should have been the Creed Humphrey draft. And instead they take Dwayne Eskridge, who just was a bust. Couldn't stay healthy, and when he was healthy, didn't do enough. Now, 2020 was good. 2022 was where we really started to see some of the definition in their scouting process start to take hold. Charles Cross with the 9th pick. And this is after the Russell Wilson trade, right? So they had these extra draft assets. Cross. Boye Mafe in the 2nd, Kenneth Walker the 3rd in the 2nd, Abraham Lucas in the 3rd. They double dip at tackle. I remember thinking, I didn't think they would do it. They needed to. It was a good tackle class that year. They actually did it. I can't believe they actually did it. That was my thought at the time when they took Lucas in the 3rd. Also, go Cougs. Kobe Bryant in the 4th, coming off the Jim Thorpe Award as the best defensive back in college. And then they double dip at corner with Reek Woolen. Loved this back-to-back pick selection because you had Bryant, a guy without the elite athletic traits, but just a really solid, accomplished, productive defensive back. And then Reek Woolen, who was the exact opposite, right? Not accomplished, converted wide receiver, small school, but just dripping with traits. Project, loved how they double dipped there and kind of covered themselves with floor and ceiling. And now, of course, Bryant, a converted safety, looks like a very, very good player and hopefully a piece of the foundation moving forward, eligible for a contract extension this offseason. Tyreek Smith out of Ohio State was hurt as a rookie, shoulder injury, kind of redshirted basically, And then he's that classic guy that would always show flashes in preseason, and coaches would talk about how much they love him, but he just never really got an opportunity. He leaves, goes to Arizona, spends a year there, mostly on the practice squad, comes back last year, and still coaches love him. I mean, he's never really broke through and become that guy on the regular roster. This might be his last opportunity to do that. And then they double dip at receiver in the 7th round. Bo Melton, Tariq Young. Young showed promise as a rookie and some versatility, athletic ability out of a really small school, but he's just never really seized a role. Probably on his last chance, last year of his rookie deal, obviously, and a pretty deep wide receiver room. He's on the outside looking in, I think, this year on the roster. Bo Melton, they end up releasing him as a rookie. He goes and catches on in Green Bay and becomes a pretty productive member of that group there. So a very, very solid group, and one that the story of this draft class is going to be told over the next 12 months with contract extensions. Does Cross get his this year or next year? They did pick up his 5th-year option for next year. If Abraham Lucas is truly healthy, do they extend him this year? Do they wait and see if they can get a full healthy year out of him? Kenneth Walker, the ultimate enigma. It's kind of nicked up from time to time, right? We have some questions about his instincts. Is the new scheme going to fit him better? Is he capable of having a massive year? Yes. And if he does, do they sign him? They have a very deep, young, and cheap running back room. It's going to be a fascinating year for him, as it is for Boye Mafe. We've seen the athletic ability and the traits, but we haven't seen the consistent production. We saw the one stretch of 7 straight games with a sack, but there are other games where he's nearly invisible. It doesn't make an impact. Just the consistency isn't there. Coaches want him to be more of a down-in, down-out player. I don't expect a contract extension for him, but he's a guy that's capable of having a blowout, breakout year, double-digit sacks, making himself a bunch of money, and forcing the Seahawks into a decision next offseason about whether to try and re-sign him or not. The 23 draft, another one, again, with the benefit of the Russell Wilson draft compensation. So they go Devin Witherspoon at 5. Lots of talk that year about whether they should take Jalen Carter, but there were the character red flags. Didn't really seem to fit in as a Seahawk from that standpoint, even though defensive tackle, nose tackle was a huge need. But Witherspoon got that momentum about a week, 2 before the draft. Brady Henderson, Corbin Smith said, hey, they really love Devin Witherspoon. He ends up being the pick. There was a lot of talk that year as well. If Anthony Richardson had fallen to 5, the Seahawks might have taken him. Dodged a bullet there. Sometimes the best draft picks have a little bit of luck involved as well. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba, I don't know why I added an apostrophe there. At 20, one of my favorite draft picks of the last few years. Just a guy that I thought filled a need, a guy that I really loved, but I didn't quite think they would take him at 20. And when they did, I was pretty ecstatic. Not as ecstatic as Jackson Bevins and his reaction. We talked about it on the show many times, but pretty close. And then 2 second-round picks again, Derek Hall, the edge out of Auburn, Zach Charbonnet, the running back out of UCLA, 2 fourths, 2 fifths, Anthony Bradford, guard, LSU, Cam Young, defensive tackle / nose tackle, Mississippi State, Mike Morris, Olu Oluwatimi, 2 Michigan teammates taken in the 5th round, Jarek Reed in the 6th, Kenny McIntosh in the 7th. Cameron Young, the only player on this list not still a Seahawk. He just couldn't stay healthy, unfortunately, because he really had a skill set and a profile that, if he was healthy and could have developed enough, would have filled a role that still is kind of unfilled on this roster, and that's young nose tackle. Just a guy that can plug up the middle. You know, when he was drafted, I remember some of the scouting reports, junkyard dog, like this guy's old school throwback, blue collar, does the dirty work. I was really excited about the pick at the time. He just couldn't stay on the field. Lot of high-end upside here, right? We're still kind of waiting for Devin Witherspoon to break out and have that season where he fills up the stat sheet. Hasn't had an interception since that Philadelphia Eagles Monday night game, his 3rd game in the league. That pick 6, 92-yard pick 6. Needs more ball production. Will he play more on the outside this year? That might give him some more opportunities to do that if Nick Emmanwori is ready to play some of the slot. Smith and Jigba, 100 catches last year. Still was kind of playing in the shadow of DK Metcalf in some respects, even though he led the team in receptions. Certainly now he's the guy. I think he's ready to have another really productive season like that and maybe sway some national people his way. He's just not showing up on these top 10 lists yet for some of the young receivers in the league. I think he will after this year. Derek Hall, I've talked about it, had the huge step forward last year with 8 sacks. I think his ceiling and upside and chance to be a long-term Seahawk are better than Boye Mafe. Plus A-plus character. Did the story a couple weeks ago. If you haven't checked that out, do, about his backstory and his upbringing. Unbelievable, the things he had to overcome to play football, let alone be an NFL player. Zach Charbonnet, we've seen he's kind of tantalized us with the sort of the tip of the iceberg upside, right? We saw it in Arizona last year. Not as twitchy, not as explosive as a Ken Walker, but a guy that might fit this scheme better, some people think. And he can pass protect, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. It's probably a starter on many teams in the NFL if he were to walk. Anthony Bradford's still in the running. I know a lot of you talk about not a scheme fit, right? We've talked about this recently on the show, but he has lost weight this year. He's more athletic. Mike McDonald called him out on that a few weeks ago. Not called him out in a bad way, but name dropped him in that sense. John Schneider says he can play in the scheme. He is athletic enough. He had some elite athletic testing coming out in the draft. He just has he has some really impressive reps on tape where you go, oh, damn, that. I want more of that. He can block guys with one arm. He can block 2 guys at once. He is strong, but there are some really, really bad pass protection reps on tape. And I still think Christian Haynes ultimately beats him out. If so, I'm not so sure. He's not a guy they've tried at other positions. So I think it might be right guard or bust for him. He might have some trade value, especially to a gap scheme team if he doesn't, a gap power team, if he doesn't beat out Haynes this preseason. Mike Morris didn't take a step forward last year. Really hoped he would. 6'6", 295. I love the inside out versatility. Maybe this is the year that he kind of puts it all together. They could certainly use it. Oluwatimi, as we sit here today, is the starting center, but being pushed hard by Jalen Sundell. And then Jarek Reed really showed some flashes as a rookie, then blew the ACL. Outstanding special teams player. I think under Mike McDonald, he really has a chance to do something, and he's a guy that I think is one of the underrated storylines of this year's training camp. Has an opportunity, I think, to really seize kind of that third safety spot. And I mean third, I'm taking Emin Wari out of the equation, thinking of him more as a box guy. But third safety behind Julian Love and Kobe Bryant has an opportunity still to be part of the future. And then Kenny McIntosh, a guy that finally got an opportunity at the end of last year to get some touches, average 5 yards a carry. You can make the case, whatever you consider him in the running back room, is he the third running back? Ultimately, does he end up the 4th running back after Damian Martinez, who they drafted this year in the 7th round? If he is, one of the best young third running backs in the league, I'd say, and a guy that if you had a rash of injuries, you'd feel really comfortable starting. So outstanding draft class, and one whose story has yet to be told. But I think 2025 is going to tell us a lot about this group, maybe more so than any of these others on the list. And then, of course, last year's group, Byron Murphy, a pick that I loved. He was my prediction before the draft, one of the only picks in the last couple of years I've nailed. Christian Haynes at 81. I was excited about that at the time. Just didn't seem to be a fit last year. And there was also a lot of dysfunction with Scott Huff and Ryan Grubb. I still am bullish on his future. Tyrese Knight, really the revelation. Well, not the revelation from this class. That'd be the other 4th round pick. But Tyrese Knight, especially, after the bye week, they let Terrell Dodson go, handed Knight the full-time job at weak side linebacker. The book on him coming out of UTEP was raw, has a lot to learn, right? But productive, makes a lot of tackles. Well, we've come to learn, and I could line up a whole bunch of analysts to come on the show and tell you that as far as statistics translating from the college game to the pro game, pretty consistently, making tackles is one of those things that it just means you have a nose for the football and you can recognize things and get to the football. And I think Tyrese Knight is a player that still, I think, doesn't really get a lot of attention when talking about this defense, just because it's so experienced, so loaded, so cohesive. But I think he has a chance to make more of a name for himself this year as well. Barner was the revelation, a guy that coming out, the youngest player in his tight end draft class. He was 21 when he was drafted. Not the twitchy athlete. I remember Curtis Allen going to practice saying it looked like he was running in quicksand. Known more for his blocking skills, but he can get you out of a third down once in a while. Long frame. Turned out to be really good in the passing game as a rookie, and just looked like a really solid two-way player. 30 catches, 245 yards, 4 touchdowns, and has a shot to be tight end 1 moving forward. They double dipped on corner on day 3. 2 Auburn corners. Obviously, DJ James was a miss. Was cut on the cut to 53, surprisingly to me. And then it took him a while to catch on. Like, it took him over a month before he caught on. I think he was on the Giants practice squad, but that just seemed to be a major scouting miss. But not. If you want to point at the DJ James pick and say, well, that was one they screwed up, so did the rest of the league. When that pick was made, the overwhelming consensus was he was showing up on like great value lists. Like, wow, I can't believe DJ James is still available in the 5th round. Like, most scouting analysts and services were saying that. So everybody missed on DJ James for whatever reason. But Nehemiah Pritchett, they're still, even though they brought in Shaq Griffin, I wouldn't really see that as a commentary on what they think of Pritchett's future. By all accounts, the people that watched the open OTAs and minicamp thought that he looked good, and the coaches are still high on Pritchett's future. And then 2 offensive linemen in the 6th round, Satawa Lamea out of Utah and Michael Jarrell, the small school tackle out of Findlay. He was pressed into action week 4 or 5 at Atlanta, right? Held his own. I mean, looked like a young right tackle from a small school having to make the transition to the NFL at times, but also showed outstanding athleticism and wasn't done any favors by the Huff Grubb combination. Was left on an island far too often when he shouldn't have been, with no tight end help, no chipping, no nothing. But the team is still high on him. And in fact, this year in OTAs, they were playing him on the left side, which he'd never done before. And I actually thought going into this year's offseason that he was going to have a hard time making the roster with the addition of Josh Jones, and then drafting Mason Richmond, who started for 4 years at left tackle at Iowa and is now playing some right tackle. I thought if Jarrell can't play both sides, he's probably going to be hard-pressed to make this roster. I think they only want to keep 9 offensive linemen this year, 10 at the most. If you can't play both sides, if you're right tackle only and you're going to be 3rd string at best, I don't think they can justify putting you on the 53-man. But playing left tackle, there's an opportunity there. I think it comes down to he or Richmond to see who makes the roster, but still a lot of upside there. And then Lamea, while he's had some issues in pass protection, love this guy's background and profile. 2 years as a starting guard at Utah at right guard, 2 years starting right tackle, made all Pac-12 conference at both spots. We've seen the athletic ability, his ability to move at his size. When they decided to pull him and do some of that pin and pull and some trap stuff that was most notable in the game at Arizona that I already mentioned, the big Zach Charbonnet game, you could really see the potential there. And then they stopped doing that. Has some improvement to make as a pass protector. But I like the feet. And, he was a guy, he leapfrogged Christian Haynes last year when Bradford got hurt and started at right guard the second half of the season. So they're working him now at right and left guard. I do think he makes the roster. I think he's kind of your super sub that can play both sides. So that's the 24 draft. So adding all that up, putting it all together, I thought about giving it a B plus, just because that's how optimistic I am. And I'm still kind of projecting what could be from this class, right? On the verge, a lot of players in this group on the verge of establishing themselves as blue chippers at Stars. But there are a couple things that caused me to take that plus away. And so I gave it a solid B. 2 of those things. One is that some of these players still need to take that step. We see the upside. We see the potential. Guys like Mafe, guys like Walker, Witherspoon, but they just haven't really put it all together and had that kind of season yet. But the talent's there, and the role they've been given on the team, it's evident that they are a foundational player, right? You look at this 90-man roster. I just counted it up again this morning. There's over 41 rookie contracts on the 90-man roster. When we get to training camp, I'll do another 53-man roster projection. I'll do one at the beginning of camp, then I'll do one a few days before the actual cutdown. And at that time, I will also itemize like how many of those players are on rookie deals. As many as most any other team in the league. And that's important. It's important to keep your cap in shape. It's just important to have young talent, usually a little bit more durable. You don't have as many injury issues. You're usually faster, more athletic, more upside. But the other thing that kept the plus away was the 2021 draft. Can't give a GM a B plus for that 5-year haul when Dwayne Eskridge instead of Creed Humphrey was part of the equation. That miss alone is worth a half a grade, knocking him down to a B. Sorry, let me get myself back in here. Come on, Dan. You'd think this was the first time I've ever done this. Let's see what some of you guys have to say. Let's go, OFG dude. John McGrath, let's go. John, I still haven't got your polo shirt in the mail, but I will shortly. Dogzilla checking in from yet another dive bar. I'm a little worried about you, dog. A little worried about you. Oh, thank you for reminding me of this. I meant to say off the top, hope everyone had a fun and safe 4th of July. I hear probably the quietest 4th of July I've ever experienced. The apartment complex that we live in here in St. Albans, West Virginia, is up on a hill, probably the highest point in this entire area. It's all very wooded. There's 6 buildings in the apartment complex. It's a lot of travel nurses. It's the quietest apartment complex that I've ever lived in, period. At least now that the cicadas have gone back underground, that made it kind of a rock show there for a while. But just also the residents are just super quiet and there's nothing really around. I think I heard like 2 fireworks the whole night. So the cats had a chill night. Let's see. Oh, see, that wasn't Rush, Dogzilla. It wasn't actually Rush. It just had a kind of a Rush feel to it. So I subscribe to, there's a bunch of these websites out there, but I subscribe to Epidemic Sound, and it's all royalty-free music. It's music that's created for them, and it's just thousands and thousands and thousands of songs. Any genre you can pick, vocals or not. You can search by genre, by beats per minute, by instrumentation. It's really, really cool. And then you just plug in whichever website you're going to use it on and you're covered. You won't have any strikes. And it's a big concern. I'm telling you, I would love to do a lot more stuff with all 22 and tape. I just can't. I can't risk it. Not on this channel. On Patreon, I can. And there will be some more of that I'll be doing with some video highlights, but just can't risk it here. Even music. So a few weeks ago, some of you may remember where I played a bit of a song called Legion of Boom by Stephen Douglas and his band, a good friend of mine. The song was literally given to me by the lead singer and the writer and producer of the song, and it still got dinged by YouTube. It didn't block the video, didn't demonetize it, but I had to share revenue with the creator. And so I disputed it. My buddy was like, sorry, man, is there anything I can do? I disputed it and just said, I was provided that song by the singer and the one who wrote it. And they actually upheld my dispute. And so I got to keep that one in there. But that's kind of crazy, right? Sonny says hello. OFG dude says, name a team that's drafted more offensive linemen in Seattle over the last 5 years. You can't, because no one has. They have drafted more offensive linemen since going back to the 2022 draft. So the last 4 drafts, they've drafted more offensive linemen than anyone in football. And when I say John Schneider, obviously when you're the GM, you get too much of the credit, too much of the criticism. but he takes a tremendous amount of input from his staff. One of the things I really, really appreciate about John, I always have, is how he goes out of his way to give credit to those guys, like without being prompted. Like it's not, he'll be on with Bob and Dave or doing a media availability at the combine or whatever. And it's not like someone goes, hey, who are the other people in your department he'll name drop every single time. He wants those guys to get credit. He gives them a lot of autonomy and a lot of authority. And they come to consensus on their picks. He doesn't just overrule his staff. Always loved that. So Bob says, folks seem to have forgotten there was a come to God, come to Jesus meeting between Pete's last 2 seasons. It seemed John came out with more juice after that. I think the shift happened in 2020. And I think we would have seen that continue into 2021 if it wasn't for COVID. I don't think they would have made all those trades. I think they would have continued with that approach because then it really got dialed in 22, and you could see it continue on from there. John says he definitely deserves praise for rebuilding the team after Carroll left and McDonald took over as head coach. I think it says a lot about him that he hired a first-time head coach, a very young head coach, someone who'd never done it, and gave him so much authority and autonomy. That is one of the, as someone who was a general manager and ran busy bars and restaurants for 13 years, I can attest to this. Like I always consider myself a humble leader, but it's tough sometimes to trust other people with responsibility and delegate. And that was something I struggled with at times. And his ability to do that is tremendous. And how much input he's given Mike McDonald. We saw it that bye week, right? Hey, these inside linebackers aren't good enough. And so Jerome Baker gets traded. Ernest Jones comes in. Terrell Dodson gets cut. If John Schneider had an insurmountable ego, he never would have made those moves because those were free agent moves he made without much input from McDonald because he was just trying to put a staff together. He had barely been on the job when free agency opened. And so Schneider just kind of had to get him a couple of linebackers. But as soon as McDonald made it clear that these guys aren't getting it done, Schneider's like, okay, you're the man. It's not easy. Not every GM in football is capable of doing that. I've certainly worked for far too many managers that didn't have that ability, and it's something that he does deserve a lot of praise for. Solaria says Pete had a ton of say over John on who to take. They both say that he almost never exercised that. That there were a couple of players, maybe we'll find out when they both retire someday who those players were, that a couple of times over their 14 years together, 15 years together, Pete has said, hey, I like this guy. But he left John alone, and he let John and his staff do his thing. And I think you'll see that in Vegas as well. Like, Pete's not a guy that's going to grind tape and do the scouting and put a draft board together like some head coaches are very involved in. He left that to John and trusted him. And so, yeah, he did contractually have final say, but he almost never exercised that. Oh, yeah. Just notice the names are back and not the handles. Way to go, YouTube. John says Chancellor's one of the best Seahawks. Loved Bam Bam destroying people. So Monday, well, actually, if you're a paid member of the YouTube channel or on Patreon, you're going to get this by tomorrow morning. But I'm doing a show where, in the past we've done all-time rosters, right? Like I said at the top, we did the all-time top 50 this year. The Seahawks did that. We reacted to it. I did my Mount Rushmore. Last year, I did some all-time rosters. It's kind of been done. I'm not going to do that every single offseason and be that redundant, right? Just because content's a little harder to come up with. But I had an epiphany the other day. One of those moments where sometimes shows just come to you, and those are my favorite ones to do. So watch out for this Monday. Unless you're a Patreon member or a paid member here, you'll get early access to it. I'm doing an all-time Seahawks team just based on who I like. My favorites. Calling it the All Dan team. Because why? What else would I call it? So keep an eye out for that. It was a really, really fun one to put together. It's not about stats. It's not about accomplishments. It's not about Pro Bowls. It's not best. It's my favorites at every single position. I guess we're talking about that first phase still, right? Because this is kind of early in the comments. 60% Pete's knowledge of these kids since he recruited them at USC. Yeah, there was some input into that. But again, it was John and his scouting staff that grinded and did all the work. But yeah, absolutely, Pete's knowledge of some of these players that were taken in that first phase absolutely played a part, as it did with some other acquisitions, like his familiarity with Marshawn Lynch and how he was built and he was wired and everything because he tried to recruit him to USC. Yeah. Let's see. So Martin doesn't like the last 5 drafts. He only likes the last 3. I don't know. 2020 was pretty damn good. Like, these guys are all still in the league, except for Alton Robinson. I guess the downside of it is none of them are still Seahawks. And so there is something to be said for that. And we may never know how much, if at all, they really wanted Jordan Brooks back. I think in retrospect, if money was no object, I think they would have wanted to have Damian Lewis and Jordan Brooks back from that class. They just kind of got stuck up against the cap and just weren't able to fit it all in. I wish they had made that work. It would have been interesting to see how that went. But who knows, sometimes when one thing goes differently in history, right? Little butterfly effect. How would it have changed other things? Let's say they keep Jordan Brooks and they keep Damian Lewis. Then, gosh, I don't know. Does it change the trajectory of Pete Carroll? Like, do they win another game or 2 that year and he keeps his job and Mike McDonald isn't hired? Like, we can have that discussion. And I've had it on my list of show ideas to do in the future, a what if concept of like alternate timelines. What if things had gone differently? What if they had drafted Creed Humphrey that year? How would it have changed history? What if they hadn't let Steve Hutchinson go? How might that have changed history? There are some other scenarios in there as well. What if Anthony Richardson had gotten to 5 and they had taken him 2 years ago, as was widely reported they might have. Yeah, that's one of those things where if in 2020, if they'd chosen to retain those 2 players, it might have changed history a little bit. But yeah, to your point, 2020, not having any of those players left, I'm not going to knock the class for that when it comes to my grade, because the selections and the process of the class are kind of what I'm leaning into. That would be more along the lines of the process of building a 53-man roster. Let's see. Hoop Craze. Dan, love the content. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, this is another kind of what if. What if we had taken Jalen Carter? Here's what I'll say about this one. Like, he's kept his nose clean. There have been 0 off-field problems. He's been a good teammate by all accounts, and he's been a very, very good player, right? Would this defense be better now with Jalen Carter instead of Devin Witherspoon? You probably don't have Byron Murphy. And so maybe, 5-6 years from now, we look back at who has the most impactful career of those two. Between those two, I still agree with the process. If you have conviction as an organization that you're going to prioritize certain qualities, and you have even just the tiniest little bit of doubt about a certain player, they brought him in for a 30 visit at the very end of the process, right before the draft. He was the last player they brought in that year, I believe. And they didn't feel good enough about taking him, versus a guy like Devin Witherspoon, who exhibited everything that they like about players as far as just his passion, how he attacks the game, how hard he works, his love for the game and commitment to it. Even when the Philadelphia Eagles selected Jalen Carter, if you could throw a little sodium pentothal Howie Roseman's way, he would tell you, hey, yeah, there's risk. We weren't sure, but at 10, That risk is a little bit more mitigated than it is at 5. And oh, by the way, 9 other teams passed on him, despite the fact that on pure talent alone, you could make an argument he could have been the first pick in the draft. So the Seahawks weren't the only team that had reservations about that. There's another one. If they draft Jalen Carter, do they trade for Leonard Williams? Like a lot of those things. Man, you can drive yourself crazy going over some of that stuff. But also, it's kind of fun too, right? Yeah. This is an interesting question. X-Wing. Let's imagine the NFL is doing some reorganizing. Not expansion, just reorganizing. Oh, I guess, okay. And they decide that they need to move a team to Salt Lake City. Is that where you live? Is that where you're pushing for this? What team would you move? I think the Jets need a reset the most. Like, from a relegation standpoint, I don't know, isn't Jacksonville like the team that struggles the most of the 32 with attendance? And they're trying to build a new stadium again, right? Isn't there some uncertainty there with them? That one might make the most sense from that standpoint. Interesting question. Couple of story ideas I'm working on for the next couple of weeks as I continue to push through. And I'll talk about some plans here in just a second, just to give you an idea of what the schedule is going to look like. But one of them is I'm going to do an all NFC West preseason team, kind of like they used to do with football conferences. Like there'd be an all Pac-12 preseason team, right? So I'll pick a starter at every position from using the 4 teams in the league. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. And then I've toyed with the idea of like if I was starting an expansion team today, like who, and you come up with some parameters on an expansion draft. What approach would I take? How would I build it? What would I focus on in the expansion draft? That can be a lot of fun. That should be an episode done with a guest for sure. Yeah, there's been talk of this, right? Like I think Khan is as open to playing, and haven't they played in London more than other teams because he's open to it? Am I wrong on that? I'd hate to see that. I don't want to see a regular team based over there. I don't think it'd be good for the league. I think you'd have a hard time signing free agents. I don't think they'd want to move their families there. I think it'd be tough. I don't like it. Don't like it at all. Dogzilla wants to know how many games the Raiders might win. Let's pull up their schedule. Let's look at it that way, shall we? Here we go. All right. Let's see. First of all, I think they're going to be really good on offense because I think Chip Kelly is really smart. And how he's evolved since his time in the NFL, taking it back to college, then to Ohio State, then back to the NFL. Now he's got Ashton Genty to build a running game around. I think there's enough on that offensive line that you can be productive with Geno. I think at some point, though, they need to acquire a receiver. Maybe they make some sort of aggressive move on the cut to 53. They need to add some juice to that receiver room. But in the meantime, you can go 2 tight ends with Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers and do a lot of damage there too. So they open at New England, Chargers. Here, let's put this on the screen. You gave me you threw me a curveball. Let's do it right. Here we go. Oh, let's see. Patriots win. Chargers at home. That's a tough one. Say Chargers. At Commanders. Don't know. Bears. Colts. Let's say 3, 4. X. I think there's 7 easy wins. I think with the culture change and the juice from Pete, I think they get to 9 wins. I do. Really, really do. All right, so I told you I'd talk about the schedule. So training camp starts the 23rd. I have been given credentials the first few days in camp, and then I'm getting an opportunity to meet with Dave and Julie and the folks in the media relations department and talk about full-time credentials. I'm optimistic. I'm so optimistic that I'm driving back instead of flying, bringing a bunch of my stuff, packing all this stuff up, obviously, bringing Butch, and because I'm that confident. Fingers crossed. Try to be humble. So that's going to mean there's 4 days that I'm on the road. And so there won't be shows. Right now, the plan is I'm leaving the 13th. So I'll arrive on the 16th. And then, but along the way, I will do as much content as I can. I pull into the hotel at the end of the night, open the laptop, do a little something. Sometimes there's moves before training camp. There might be a contract extension, although those usually happen the first week of camp. We're still waiting for the 2 second-round picks to get signed. And then there are these other story ideas. And I'll try to preload a couple things too, so that when I'm on the road, there's a couple shows lined up. And then, maybe kind of like Senior Bowl week, I'll just do lives while I'm traveling and kind of shoot the shit. I also plan to do sort of a travel series off to the side, just kind of documenting my drive home. That'll be on a separate playlist on the channel. You can watch it if you want to or not, whatever. And so there will be a little bit of a blackout period there before we get back. So a couple of things. If you want to sign up for the new Substack, because I am writing again, and I'll be doing that in conjunction with all the coverage that you see here on the channel and on the Patreon. You sign up now, it's going to be free into camp. And then I think even the day one camp notes, I'll have that be free too, as a reward for anyone that wants to sign up between now and then. I've had a lot of fun, just those first 2 pieces, like knocking the rust off, but also just remembering, just getting back in touch with the writing side of what I do. I really enjoy it. I've gotten some good feedback on it so far. Then there is the Patreon. Again, not a lot of exclusive content over the next couple of weeks, just because there isn't that much to do. Although when I post a show, I'll try to give you early access at least. But once camp opens, there will be a lot of, there will be interviews that will only be shown on Patreon. There will be just practice footage within the rules allowed by the Seahawks of how much I can show that I'll put up over there as well. So those are a couple ways you can help support me in as I am a full-time content creator. And then just subscribe to the channel and like the video and do all of that as well. My route is going to be interesting. So Iowa City the first night, trying to keep it to no more than 10 hours driving each day. Iowa City the first night, really, really tempting. I was hoping to make the Field of Dreams ballpark and movie site part of that, but it's like an hour out of the way. I don't think I can justify that. Then Rapid City, South Dakota, the second day, I absolutely will go a half an hour out of my way to see Mount Rushmore, as I never have. And then Missoula, Montana, the third day. That'll be kind of cool because I lived in Missoula between the ages of 5 and 8. Our house, one of the houses we owned while we were there, was on the hill with the M on it. So it'd just be kind of cool to see Missoula again. And then home on the 16th. And I'll get set up as quickly as possible, do a bunch of shows and camp previews, have all the content creators and all those guys in, and set some things up for camp. And then some really cool ideas also. Let me just drop a little hint here. God, 6-7 years ago, we did a big live on location camp preview, myself and a bunch of other podcasters. We're talking about a similar idea this year as well. So that's just kind of some of the stuff coming up. In the meantime, follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. And then check out the description because that has all the other things down below. Forever and always, go Hawks. Thanks for watching, you guys. I really appreciate all of the views and listens and support. We'll see you next time.